As many of you know, in health coaching and beyond, we alternate conversations between the two of us, chewing over hot topics, latest news and emerging ideas, but also bringing you conversations with thought leaders and people we admire in the field of health coaching and beyond. This week, our focus is really on a scorching hot topic, exploring the use of GLP-1 agonists, the likes of Wegovy, Ozempic and Mounjaro. The numbers of people using these medications for weight loss has exploded. But alongside that, the side effects and problem associated with the medications is also ballooning. So who better to join us than GLP-1 specialist health coach, Nikki Coughlan? She's been a pioneer of health coaching support for people using these medications for weight loss for over 4 years. She has a deep insight into the ups and downs and shares her real-life experiences here. Whether you're taking or considering taking a GLP-1 medication, you're a health coach or clinician supporting someone taking them, a friend or family member that wants more insight, or just curious about the topic everyone's talking about, this is the episode for you. Hello, folks. Welcome back to our Health Coaching Beyond podcast. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Nikki Coughlan, who is a health coach from Southern Ireland, got to get that right, who has spent her last 4 years specializing in health coaching for people taking GLP-1 injections. So we're promising a really interesting conversation for someone who really knows what they're talking about. So Nikki, welcome.
Thanks very much. Good to be here. Thanks, Ollie, for the invitation.
Yeah, lovely. And it's always lovely for you to perhaps introduce a bit about your background and who you are and what your experience has been over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a certified health coach and a registered nutritional therapist, and I specialize in obesity care and supporting people on GLP-1 medications. So I started out in this field over 4 years ago. So it was exactly the time when GLP-1 medications were getting prescribed for weight management increasingly. So that's why I kind of entered this space. And since then, obviously, the market grew a lot. And today it's a very different world compared to how it started a few years ago.
Yeah, you've really been one of the pioneers right at the start. And of course, GLP-1s have been used for diabetes for nearly 2 decades now, haven't they? But since they got used for obesity, there's been an explosion of interest, hasn't there? So you were working for a company leading a team of health coaches, is that right? Have I got that? Remember that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for a few years, I led the health coaching team at a digital obesity clinic in Ireland. So I was in a really privileged position to be able to work with doctors, dietitians, and our fellow health coaches as well, to really get to know, how GLP-1 medications can transform people's health and what it can mean for them. And I think I learned a lot from this experience, and I really am a big advocate for integrating these medications into obesity care and also obviously health coaching as well, because I had first-hand experience of the difference health coaching can make in these settings and in clinical care overall.
So I've had the privilege of sitting alongside you on a course. We've talked together around this now, haven't we? And just I see the way you explain it to other people really shows how much you know about the area. Fantastic. And of course, in GLP-1, the usage now has gone crazy, isn't it? How many people in the UK are using GLP-1 injections now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it should be around up to 2 million, perhaps.
2
Don't
million.
quote me on that, but I think the latest statistic shows around 1.5 to 2 million people, and I can see it growing very rapidly from this day onwards.
That's crazy, isn't it? And of course,
Yeah.
there's only a fraction of those that will actually be prescribed that through the NHS, and so I guess the majority of people are getting those through private prescriptions, which was how the company you were working with operated. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked in a private obesity clinic, and I think this is still the way of access for most people. And in a publicly funded version, I think there's not many people who can access the medications. I believe the criteria is quite strict, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. But there are a lot of private healthcare companies these days who specialize in this area as well.
So the support people get is very variable.
Very, very variable. And I think this is one of the issues these days. Ever since these medications became available for weight management, I think access has been growing very steadily over the years, and it almost exploded in the past year or past 2 years. So access is not a problem anymore. People can access the medications, but the wraparound care is becoming a huge problem and a huge gap, because that this is what can make or break people's health at the end of the day. I think it's a really great thing that we can access the medications way easier, even through public or through GPs, also private settings, but that doesn't mean that we don't need the support with it. And this is, I think, where we lack support at the moment, and that's a huge problem.
Yeah, and we're going to go on to dive down into that with you. But I guess thinking maybe for listeners, some people won't know exactly how GLP-1s work. Maybe you could just give us a very brief background about how they work and what sort of formulations they come in, because there's actually now an oral version coming out, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just got approved in the UK as well, so it is coming very, very soon. So at the moment, so GLP-1 medications is glucagon-like peptide-1 receptor agonist. This basically a hormone that naturally is produced in our gut in response to food. So basically, when we eat something, this GLP-1 hormone is produced naturally. It tells our brain that we are full. So it's signaling that we are full. You can stop eating. All good. So what these GLP-1 medications are doing is essentially adding on to that GLP-1, so it's mimicking the same hormone, so it's going to tell your brain that you are full really, really quickly. So essentially, it helps you to manage your food intake a lot better. So first of all, it will give you that satiety sensation. And of course, there are other various benefits of the medications as well. So aside from obviously being satiated quicker and feeling full longer, the food will sit in your stomach longer as well. So it slows down the gut motility. So this is why, for example, the likes of nausea is very, very frequent, because the food will sit in your stomach a lot longer. Gut motility slows down, so constipation can be a little bit of an issue. But the medications have other impact on your body, so it can help manage your blood sugar a lot better. And also it has some quite interesting anti-inflammatory effect as well overall, which is still being researched and studied. So it has various impact on our bodies, and so far, there has been a lot of research going on around additional effects and additional areas where it might help, even with things like addiction. There is some really interesting research going on. So who knows what else will come in the
Yeah.
yeah.
And I guess the prime effect is in the gut, but I know there's GLP-1 receptors in the brain as well, and other parts of the body, aren't there? Which that accounts for some of the other effects of the GLP-1s alongside slowing the gut down and making you feel
Yeah,
full.
absolutely. Yeah. So it alters the brain reward signaling. So basically, food will not trigger the same reward as before. So instead of when you are feeling upset and maybe you want a cookie or some chocolate to get that feel good sensation afterwards, it kind of blunts down that effect in the brain, and it really helps with the cravings. So that's one of the very interesting areas of GLP-1s. So cravings will be reduced because that kind of reward will not be there anymore. And I believe this is, why they are researching it for other addiction reasons as well, or other addiction ways. So yeah, it is really, really interesting. And at the moment, the most, let's say, popular GLP-1 medication would be tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro. And there's also semaglutide, which is Wegovy or Ozempic.
Household names now almost, aren't they, though? So Ozempic and Wegovy, Mounjaro. And of course, some of those have more than one effect, don't they? So it's GLP-1 and some additional receptor effects as well.
Yes, so the GLP-1 is semaglutide, that would be Ozempic or Wegovy in the UK as well. And that's just the GLP-1. So that only works with that one hormone, which is our GLP-1, versus tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro, that works with two hormones, which is GLP-1 is one of them, and the other one is GIP, which is another receptor agonist. So it's a dual hormone, so that's why they consider it let's say, more advanced medication, but it really depends on the individual biology. So some people respond to tirzepatide better than semaglutide, so they might prefer Mounjaro over Wegovy, but there is no way to tell. Some people then prefer Wegovy over Mounjaro, so down to their biology. And I suppose the oral version of Wegovy is the one that was just recently approved, so that's coming soon.
Yeah, goodness. And that'll make it a bit easier, won't it? And of course, these are long-acting medications, aren't they? So as I understand it, so things like GLP-1 and GIP get released normally in our body, but they're around just for a matter of seconds, maybe minutes. But actually what this is doing is keeping those hormones active for days at a time. Is that right?
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. So that's the main mechanism. We have an enzyme that breaks down this GLP-1 and the GIP in minutes, and they found a way to extend the shelf life of these hormones, and that's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, got you. Wow. Goodness. And we can come, I mean, I've heard people talk about this concept of food noise, isn't it? That actually it can be such a relief to people to have the quietening of that food noise, the pressure to want to eat stuff and so on. But I know that comes with side effects. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, aren't we? Around the pros and cons, I guess, of not getting the reward from food. It can really help with weight loss, but also it comes perhaps with other issues to deal with as well, which I know you've really worked on, which is maybe quite a good lead into, why health coaching is valuable alongside these medications. So I mean, I guess first of all, how successful have you seen these medicines been, Nikki? I mean, well, millions of people are taking them. There must be a reason, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I have seen incredible transformations. I think it is true that it is a very revolutionary medication and treatment, and I think there's no stopping it, right? Because if you look at the pipeline, there will be even more effective medications in the future. We will be reaching bariatric level weight loss, which is very significant.
That's
Um,
bariatric surgery, so equivalent of having your stomach pinned and stapled, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's incredible to be able to achieve that through medication without the surgery. I think that will definitely be an incredible achievement if we can do that safely. Um, so I do see, incredible transformation and success on the medications. But I think it's really important to note as well that if you respond to the medication, it's purely down to your biology. So for some people, if your biology responds to the medication, that's great. But, there are still many people who are not in that category, and maybe they do try the medications and their biology just don't respond to it. So they cannot achieve meaningful weight loss. So I just want to mention as well that it is not anyone's fault if that happens. It's a response from your body, and there is no way of telling. They still don't know, who will respond to it and who won't. And if you are in that, fortunate position that your biology responds to it really well, then you can absolutely, achieve great things. But as with everything, it kind of opens the opportunity window. But what you do with that opportunity is really down to you, because it will help to blunt the cravings and the hunger signals. But what I usually say is that the medication will not make decisions for you. So you will still have that choice to look after your health, to do things that maybe wasn't accessible before, but now with the medication, you have the headspace to do that. And I think that headspace, I think it's the single most important thing that I keep hearing from people, that they finally have that headspace so they can focus on other things besides the food and the food noise.
Yeah, that's a lovely term, that window of opportunity. So clearly you're in the realm of offering health coaching support to wrap around the medication to help people make the most of that window of opportunity. So how does that work, Nikki? And why would you say it's important?
When it comes to health coaching, and where it can make a real difference is to accompany people on their journey with the medication, because it can really bring up unexpected effects and unexpected things that they might not anticipate. So I feel that this is a very emotional journey, and if we consider our overall relationship with food, I think it's quite understandable why and how it is a little bit of an emotional journey on its own. First of all, I think we all have very intimate relationship with food, but it really does tie into, our culture, our social habits, our, sharing meals with others, sharing meals with our partners, and of course, using food as a primary coping strategy very often when we are stressed, when we are bored, when we can't sleep. So there's so many ways we are using food in our lives. And all of a sudden, when that's taken away from one day to another, that comes with challenges. So it can, challenge some of our relationships. For example, what happens when we don't have that ritual of sharing meals with others, when we don't have that, drive to cook for our families because something changed. And also, if that's an important coping strategy, how we manage stress. If that's taken away, we will still have those emotions that upset the stress, and we have to learn how to, first of all, sit with it, which is incredibly uncomfortable. And second, very importantly, develop alternative ways where we can help ourselves, because unfortunately, life will continue to be quite stressful. And we will
Yes.
need to make sure that we arm ourselves with different tools that actually help us. So there can be these unexpected things that happen on the journey. And that's why health coaching is so important, because, you need that sounding board. And of course, health coaches can also help you to develop habits that are realistic for you, irrespective of what you see on social media, because that's one thing, we will get a lot of, and nowadays I think people get a lot of information from social media, but that's not your life. You're still on your own journey. And that's a huge difference. So I think there's a lot of work we can do to support people on these medications.
Yeah, I can see that completely. And I've heard you say before that one patient said to you it felt like they'd lost a friend, that the sort of like the emotional crux of food for them, and they really weren't prepared for that. Do you want to dive down a bit into that story, maybe that person, or how you dealt with that?
Yeah, and I think that brings up a really important aspect of this journey. So, some people definitely will benefit from psychological support as well. And I think psychological support is still not widely, integrated into obesity care pathways, which I think is terrible. I think we would need, health coaches, psychologists, dietitians, doctors, all of that. That would be a real comprehensive, wraparound support that we don't have. Even if you look at, the private setting, um, there is not a whole person clinic out there that does it all. So the access is very limited. But for some people, definitely the relationship with food can be such an important aspect in their mental health that they might find that they can't really go on the medications, because again, that if that primary coping mechanism is so important, and maybe there can be a trauma in the background, there can be different things, mental health aspects, then it's not always sensible to go on the medication. But that's up to their primary care team to decide on that. But I will never forget this. I worked with this lady who described, when she did start the GLP-1 medications, and she was the one who described to me that, she did feel like she lost a friend, a very important friend that she could always rely on. The friend was always there, no matter what. And essentially, she decided to stop taking the medication because she realized that she needed more support and more psychological support. But those stories are quite common as well, and that's why it's not a fix. It's not a quick fix. It's something that needs to be evaluated in a whole person setting, as opposed to just looking to, for example, a weight figure and prescribe a medication just based on that.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm really admiring the way that you're kind of, you're aware of your scope as a health coach. You're not a psychologist. You're not able to give expert psychological support, and you recognize the limits. But what would you end up doing then as a health coach often with people when they were taking these medications?
Yeah, so first of all, I love to understand their why. So really having a look at why are they on this journey, what they're comfortable sharing, what would be their ideal outcome, or what are their hopes, what's the North Star that we are aiming for, and just to understand better, where they are coming from. I think it's important to really dive deep into our goals and why we are doing what we are doing, because there can be a lot of bumps and hurdles on this journey, and we need to have this whole picture of where do we want to get. And very often weight is not the only thing. Maybe it's on that list, but there are so many other things what we might want to do on this journey. And it's important to keep an eye on those other goals as well, because no matter what's happening weight wise, there can be other things that are improving, and it's important. And that can be, for some people, it can be health markers, reducing cholesterol or blood pressure or other things. And for others, it can be, just feeling that their stamina is improving, their fitness level gets better, maybe their energy gets better or their sleep gets better. So there can be other things along the way. So that's the very first thing that I always do.
Love
Um,
that.
and depending on, where they are at in life, everyone has their own individual barriers and challenges that they are facing when it comes to achieving their goals. So always do some exploration. No two journeys are the same. So it's always slightly different for everyone. But depending on, the individual I'm working with, it can be anything from, just making sure that they are nourishing themselves on the GLP-1 journey, because appetite can change so much that it's important to adjust to that too.
So they're
Or
not getting enough quality food in their diet because they
yeah.
just don't want to eat anything. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's a huge problem as well, to make sure that they remember to eat and they eat enough. So that can be a big one. But very often, we work on learning more self-compassion and creating space for our own needs. I think that's a very common theme that I noticed. Just to have that high pressure, to live in that high pressure environment whereby you come last on that list, and of course, you survive the best way you can, but you just keep giving. And learning how to take some space for yourself, for your own health, is actually, I think, one of the biggest areas that almost always needs a slight improvement or a slight change. But learning to be kinder and more compassionate is a big part of what I'm doing.
I know that's great, and I can see that. It's a when we talk about health coaching, we always talk about a little bit of a hierarchy, and actually, the baseline for us in anything is around that self-compassion, how you value yourself and your sense of self-worth. And so often that's lacking, isn't it? Particularly in people who are trying to lose weight, they're trying to maybe do things for other people rather than for themselves, and satisfy social norms and expectations, and that can actually be quite self-persecutory in a lot of ways, can't it? And I really value that making sure that's right, and that helps the longevity of the journey for people, I guess, and the sustainability in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important that we remember that there's a lot of stigma and shame attached to obesity, and even, going on GLP-1 medication still. The conversation is changing, but it's changing very slow, like everything. So I think that's important to take into account. So anyone who starts on a GLP-1 medications, they can face that stigma even in healthcare settings,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
make things really difficult.
I know I've heard that so many patients actually say they don't want to tell their family. They're not going to tell their brother or their parents or whatever. They're worried about the stigma of people saying, "Oh, and even when they start to lose weight, they're worried that everyone's going to go, 'Oh, you're taking the jab,' sort of." So that's again something you help people deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's still a cheating narrative, oh, it's cheating, or it's a quick fix, and all these other things. And yeah, definitely having some space so you can talk about it freely. I think it's important too, because at the end of the day, health coaches are also, sounding boards, and it's a non-judgmental, safe space where you can express all the frustration and all the, difficulties that you face on this journey, and that can be so helpful to have that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see that. And of course, there's some very real side effects that often come up. You've alluded to the nausea and the kind of fullness, but also there's this issue around muscle loss, isn't there, that people worry about. So, do you want to talk to how health coaching supports kind of mitigating some of those side effects?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we mentioned briefly already was around the appetite fluctuation. So I think one of the easiest thing on GLP-1 medications is to forget to eat and nourish yourself. It will give you that window of opportunity that, food will stop becoming the number one priority. So that's great. That you will be in a much better position to make decisions around food choices. But at the same time, you can either, eat the same or not care about what you are eating, but because you are eating less than happy days, or you can make sure that you're nourishing your body with what it needs. And because your appetite is reduced, you have to fit in a lot more nutrition in a much less amount of food. So it's important to be smart about it, because, your body will still need protein, it still needs, good fats, it will still need a little bit of carbs as well. So all in balance. And if, you rely on the appetite suppression and your appetite is suppressed so much that you are skipping meals or you're just not eating at all, then it will backfire, and that's where problems can start happening. Like you might notice becoming weaker or very tired and exhausted, and those are just signs that maybe you're not eating enough. And that can be really tricky as well, because one of the things that will happen is that the hunger signals will not be there reliably anymore. So instead of actually feeling that usual hunger that you were used to, there might be other ways that, your body might signal that you need food, like maybe getting a little bit dizzy or lightheaded. So it's almost like you have to learn again, your body's signals and make sure that there is like steady nutrition coming in. And I think that's where health coaches can really help, because, you can really co-create a strategy to make sure that you eat enough. There can be smaller meals more frequently throughout the day. There can be reminders on the phone that work super good. And there can be, tailoring some of the meals you are eating to make sure that it's a bit more nourishing.
Yeah, and I think you've alluded to this, and it's really struck me in talking to you. I hadn't really realized how variable the kind of appetite suppression can be. So it's not just consistent. Sometimes it can be really full on, and other times it kind of backs off. So people are dealing with this a little bit of an on off sort of situation.
Yeah, it can fluctuate a lot, especially at the start when you go on the medication first. People do report very variable appetite signaling and hunger, and that's very normal. And also because the medication is mostly once weekly, except the injectables are once weekly. So it's very common to hear that by the end of the week, the effect of the medication reduces, so they feel a little bit hungrier, which is perfectly normal. But it does vary, so you have to kind of get used to it. Some days you might not tolerate a lot of food, other days you might be a lot hungrier. So you have to have that kind of plan A, plan B on those days, what fits in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can see the benefit. I'll keep us. There's so many topics to bring up, so many things going through my head. But of course, the other big worry is, of course, when they've lost their weight and they want to come off the medications or reduce them. It's that maintenance piece, isn't it? And I think that's again where health coaching can really help, isn't it? In terms of helping people to maintain their weight loss
Mm.
and come off the medications, maybe.
Yeah, that's always a tricky question, isn't it? I think everyone is talking about maintenance these days,
Mm.
and I think no one perfectly figured it out yet, because what we know is that because obesity is a chronic disease, it is expected that people will need to remain on treatment in order to be treated for their obesity. So that's the current clinical guidance. So that means that clinicians do not recommend stopping the medication, simply because the expectation is that once you stop the medication, you will regain the weight. Similarly, as many people who would stop their blood pressure medication from one day to another, we would expect their blood pressure to be all over the place afterwards. So it's kind of the same story here. Now, the type of medication might change. So there's a good research coming out now. What happens when we switch someone from injectable to the oral medications, and that can help with that maintenance piece. So the kind of medication might change, but it is expected that when someone stops the medication, they may regain the weight. Not everyone, not all the weight, but that might happen. And there are a few different reasons behind that. There is a very, very, very strong biological current that you might experience once you stop the medication. The body will fight back, the brain fights back. It doesn't really like when we lose weight. So the brain will be like, oh gosh, we need to survive here. Let me put on all the adipose tissue back. So there are very strong biological processes. It's not because someone loses their willpower. That just happens because, our brain regulates our weight. And that doesn't mean that, people don't desire, don't want to stop the medication. So, and that's perfectly fine to try. I think everyone is, we health coaches advocate for that self-efficacy and self-management. So if someone decides that they want to see how they get on without the medication, that's their decision. They can absolutely try that. And I think this is where, as you said, the health coaching support can be really, really helpful because, if you have a routine in place that you work together on, that you're really happy with, where you are, no matter how that looks like for you, then carrying that onwards is really important because things will change when you start the medication. You might notice feeling a lot hungrier. There might be new stressors in life that's happening, and you might need to have a really solid foundation to get back to. So I think, as always with health coaching, it doesn't have to be just at one stage of the journey. You can decide to work with someone at the start, in the middle, at the end, if that's a more sustainable approach for you. But it does matter because, when the medication stops, there will be some effects, that you will notice definitely.
Yeah, no, and I'm really picking up there, Nikki. Like a true health coach, you're very non-blame, non-judgmental, and the focus is on keeping people in control and in the driving seat. But I do see that if you can help people to really lock in new habits and new ways of doing things, as perhaps they back off the medication a bit, and the biological kind of suppression might start to recede, and actually there are benefits, right, of reducing the dose and sort of not having so much medicine in your body, but not if it means that you kind of regain all the weight and lose the ground you've made. So I can see that the tricky balance. It can be really good to. And yeah, so the other I wanted to explore this. I've heard you say one point one of your patients was actually a food critic. Do you want to tell that story, because that was somebody who I guess made their living out of tasting food and
Yeah. Oh my God, I loved working with her. And I think it's I was able to witness so many transformations, so many different journeys as well, and I really loved hers. And yeah, she was a food critic, and obviously she was quite apprehensive starting the medication because back then we knew that it will change how she experiences food. So it was definitely one of her livelihoods. So it was a real concern. And at the end of the day, what she described to me on her journey is that she was able to enjoy food a lot more than before. And I found that really fascinating, what she described, because since then, I heard that from other people as well, that instead of, not being able to enjoy food altogether, it was quite the opposite. They learned to enjoy even more, because I suppose, well, I can't speak on their behalf, but what I imagine might happen is that because you don't have that urge, that drive to, eat the food very fast, very quickly. It's, when before the medication, the food might serve a different purpose for just to take in as much food as possible. Versus here, when your appetite, hunger reduce, you don't have the same drive. You might be able to actually slow down and be more present and really savor it. And I think that's an interesting aspect that I heard some people mention, and I think that happened to her as well. But aside from her story, one of the very interesting thing, and I think it really goes to show how complex obesity really is that I witnessed people changing their entire professions and, quitting jobs, taking different jobs, doing huge changes in their life because they realized that one of their primary triggers or one of the mechanisms that were really unsupportive is actually, their livelihood, their jobs. And in order for them to feel healthier, become healthier, they actually had to change their profession altogether and find another job. And I think that really goes to show, it's a really complex issue. It's not just about someone's weight or how much food we are eating. We have to look at the environment. If the environment is really unsupportive, then we can have the best intention in the world, but it will be an uphill battle. And, that's one aspect that we need to consider.
Yeah, I can see that. That getting to that root cause, isn't it? What is it that's driving the emotional eating and the sort of self-persecution that often goes with the chronic disease of obesity, like you say, and actually changing your environment can be really powerful, can't it? And I can
Yeah.
imagine having a coach to support you through that, really important, because it's a really difficult thing to go through alone, right? But having someone who's non-judgmental, giving you space to think, try some things out, help you review the success or not of things, I can just see the value of it hugely.
Mm, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
so
Fan of it.
yeah, of course, Nikki, and you're very good at it as well, I know. And so, tell me about the evidence you've seen of success. Then, I mean, I know you're really curious about research. You led that whole team working there in Ireland. What evidence did you see of the additional success of health coaching? I guess really.
Yeah. So there are some really good research coming out now. Obviously, the research that we have at hand is mostly, private clinics publishing their own user data. So I wish there was randomized control trials that are, examining the health coaching outcomes, but we are not quite there yet. Hopefully one day. But what the clinics are publishing, obviously their own about their own cohort is really promising. So those, integrated care teams who actually have health coaching on board, they do report, better weight loss overall, so more weight loss and also improvement in quality of life. So that's really important. So it can be anything from, nutritional adequacy to, physical activity improvements that is measurable. I think it is still a quite difficult thing to research because we don't have those validated health coaching specific outcome measures just yet. There are some, really good tools out there, but none that would be, the single one to use. So far we rely on, these cohort studies that are being published from private clinics, but it's still very encouraging and it still, definitely shows that health coaching has a place in obesity care and in clinical setting in general, and they do make a difference because you can see very clearly that those who engage with health coaching more have better outcomes than those who don't. So I think that's a very good
Yeah.
direction.
Well, thanks, Nikki. That's a really honest reflection. I think that's always a risk, isn't it, for people like us that value health coaching, that we're very biased and we want to sort of say
Yeah.
it's great for everything. But I can see it coming out in more and more of the national guidance and the frameworks around support, the importance of the emotional support and the wrap around support, as you say, because it's the changes in lifestyle and the changes in your mindset and your long-term habits that really determine whether the medicine is successful in the end or not. Like you say, it gives you a window of opportunity, but that window of opportunity has to be capitalized on with all these other changes as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because at the end of the day, health coaching is there, for those between appointment kind of life that makes or breaks anyone's health and progress. We can show up on all the doctor appointments and try our best to look after our health, but what happens between all those appointments? It's life. And
Yeah,
what do
yeah.
we do? Like there's so many, challenges and hurdles that we have to get through to improve our health. And I think health coaching can make such a huge difference. And I think uh, hopefully this will get even more and more recognition in the future. That's what I'm hoping for. But I think there's also a lot of improvement to do in terms of integrating more health coaching into clinical settings. Because from what I see, most of the investments, let's say, I obviously have more oversight over the private healthcare systems, but I do see, more investments going into clinical care, which is is crucial, very important, don't get me wrong. But because, health coaching and lifestyle behavior support is recognized as a crucial addition to obesity care. I do feel like more investment would be needed to make sure that, it actually happens, because I don't see that happening as much as I want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I know this is not the purpose of why you came on here at all, but it's and we try not to be too promotional on this. It's just good to have discussion about key hot topics. But we're delighted that you are helping us with the education piece. The NHS has invested in over 1,000 health coaches, and if they understand how to support people, fantastic. And equally, people working out privately as health coaches, if they've got these skills to support people, I think it, like you say, it really is a service to the system. So we have our joint program now, don't we? A day where we do metabolic background metabolic science in the morning, and in the afternoon it's all around you teaching people how to use health coaching skills to support people taking GLP-1 type medications. And we're really grateful for that. Next one, it will be live in November, so we're taking bookings for that through our website. But also you practice privately as well, Nikki, don't you? I suspect you're extremely busy. Have you got any capacity to support people? If anyone's listening to this and they think, "Oh, I'd love a bit of support from Nikki."
Yeah, sure. My website is glp1coach.ie, so anyone can look me up and contact me. Always happy to have a chat. I'm very open.
You certainly are. You're very, very inclusive in sharing and very, very generous in sharing your insights, Nikki, which is really hugely valuable now. Like you say, you've been one of the pioneers from the start, since this started being prescribing for weight loss. And so just say that way again, glp1healthcoach.ie.
GLP-1 coach.
GLP-1 coach.
Yeah. Thanks,
Lovely.
I really appreciate it.
You're going to be overwhelmed now. That's that. Yeah, but I can certainly attest to the sensitivity and the generosity of your support all round. Thanks, Nikki.
Not at all. And I'm also very happy to chat to other health coaches, because this is a very growing field, even with the GLP-1 care. So anyone who is interested in GLP-1 care, send me a message. I'm very happy to chat, to help you get started, or to answer any questions. I'm really, really passionate about this field, and I think there's so much space for more health coaching specializing in obesity care. So yeah, the more the better.
So they can find your contact details through that website.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Nikki. Well, thanks so much. I'll stop with that. I feel like I could go on for ages. There's so much other stuff we could talk, isn't there? Certainly about the emotional adjustments to this, and it's an emerging field. So we'll watch it closely, and we're really privileged to be working together with you. And thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ollie.